So a couple of days ago, Nio said in a new announcement that it plans to issue around 137 million new Class A shares. This is a dilution to the tune of roughly 6.6%, which will bring in also roughly 500 million or so US dollar to the company's cash position. On the webpage, Nio said that it's for R&D cost and new product launches, but the stock has been going down. It's now sitting at around 3.75 US dollar as of latest market close on March 28. The question we have to ask ourselves, is Nio starting to lose control compared to the peers like Zeekr and Xpeng? It's important to remember that this isn't Nio's first cash grab since 2023. They leaned on big investors recently in Abu Dhabi, I believe, for around 2.2 billion, if I recall those numbers correctly, roughly a year ago. In the latest earnings, they show a revenue of around 2.7 billion US dollar, which was up 15% based on a record delivery number of 73,000 almost. But the net loss also went up 32% to 974 million. That is not a good place to be. You don't want to see the revenue go up, but the net loss going up even more, especially in a very difficult position for a company that is already making a lot of net loss compared to the competitors. The current cash position sits around 5.5 billion. Probably with this one is gonna sit around 6 billion. But with again a roughly expected 850 to 900 million net loss for Q1 of 2021 due to the lower delivery numbers, this could also be further bad news. Obviously the 500 million or so in the new share offering will buy some time, but the management's credibility is kind of fraying in my opinion. In 2023, they actually pumped up their sales team in order to be ready for the demand and sales of roughly 30,000 sales on a monthly basis. Now, roughly 2 years later, in March of 2025, we can see that in December of last year, they hit that target of 31,000, but January and February this year has been around 13 to 14,000. And over these past 2 years, on average, they haven't been anywhere close to those numbers of 30,000 monthly deliveries you can see here. The blue numbers are for 24, green are 23, and gray are expected numbers for 2025. So you can see that as they promised in early 2023, they essentially only once met that target, and that was December of last year. But on average, they've been closer to 20,000. Still good numbers, but nowhere near that kind of target of 2 years ago. I think at the time in 2023, when people hear this number, most of us believe that by this time in 2025, Nio would probably be doing like 40-50,000 monthly sales. Now the CEO is banking on the Q4 25 profitability for a single quarter, hoping to double the 2024's 220,000 sales and make it to 440,000 sales. Nio currently has roughly 8 models, if I recall, ES8, ES6, 85, 87, and so on and so forth. Also the Onvo L60. Then there's Firefly coming up in a couple of months. We also know that they just yesterday launched the deliveries of the luxury ET9. That car is obviously 3 to 4 times the cost of the average sales price of Nio cars. So they will have really nice margin on that, but probably that's not going to be a high volume car. How many people in China can afford to buy almost $100,000 electric vehicle? It's not going to be that many. Yet, despite this essentially buffet of different number of cars, they're not moving, in my opinion, big enough number of cars per model. You can see that in 24 they sold 220,000, while Zeekr sold 260,000. And how many cars did Nio sell in Europe with all the, expensive Nio sales houses in Stockholm and Gothenburg and north of Europe in Norway and Germany? Well, I think they sold like 12 to 1,300 cars in 2022, and I think the numbers are currently between 3 to 4,000 for 2024. We can also see that the swap stations sitting at around 3,200 swap stations currently. Some days, during some weeks, they add roughly 15 to 20 new swap stations, which is very costly. We know that they are saying that they need 60 swaps daily to reach break even for each of the single stations, which is very, very tall order for Nio with such a low fleet size in order to reach that kind of number. Currently, I think they're sitting around high 20s and low 30 swaps per station. So they need double that. But it's difficult because even if they double their vehicle sales this year, remember they are expanding their number of swap stations much faster. So it's a very, it's difficult. They would need to triple their sales, like to 700,000 million cars, sorry, 1,000 cars in order to reach that 60 swaps per station. Also comparing to the competitors like Xpeng, that Xpeng had in Q4 of last year, roughly 2.1 billion in revenue on 60,000 deliveries. They made a net loss of 190 million, which was down 40%, which is compared to the previous year. And that is like, think about it. Nio made almost 1 billion in net loss, and Xpeng made 190 million in net loss. And Zeekr, well, they had a 3.1 billion in net sales in revenue on the basis of almost 80,000 deliveries, and they made a 112 million net loss. So it's like they're leaner, they're selling fewer models, they're on the path to sell many more cars of them also, while Nio is downing despite its, the floods of different models. I mean, they have a lot of different models. And the CEO Lee has promised profitability previously, if I recall, for at least a single quarter. Don't hold me to that, but I think if I recall something vaguely that he had done that previously possibly. And they had many different big goals which they haven't met in the past few years. The latest of them, obviously, everyone knows about the promise about Onvo selling like almost 20,000 cars in March, and we are now by end of March, and they obviously will not be anywhere close to that target, which they set just, months ago, couple of months ago, 3 months ago. So yeah, they seem to promise a lot, but rarely they get success in meeting those promises. We know also that CEO sometimes mentioned like spikes of order, that everything is gonna turn good. Well, those spikes usually are momentarily for a couple of weeks, potentially a couple of months, when again everything goes a little bit down and they have to give people incentive. So it's a very competitive market, and the question is, are we coming to a point where the swap infrastructure is simply too costly? Like people are talking about 1,000 kilowatts fast charging on BYDs these days, right? Or 500 kilowatts. I mean, you can charge your battery in 10-15 minutes. Maybe the battery swapping is not a great advantage as Nio would have believed a couple of years ago. The advantage with battery swapping obviously is that you can afford to have a smaller battery, and once you're in a longer road trip, maybe you change for a bigger battery. You can easily change your battery if something's wrong with that. So there's a lot of advantages. Now the future for Nio is unclear right now. I think, sure, even if they had like 6 billion in cash now, but I mean, these like 1 billion or so net losses each quarter, even if I understand discussion online is, maybe it's also a little bit of accounting. Maybe, they amortize some of the cost, up front, and not do it like, for example, if you build a swap station fleet of, let's say, 100 swap stations, and let's say they cost 500,000 each, that's 50 million, right? Maybe like they write down that cost, in 1 or 2 years instead of 5 or 10 years, because the lifetime of these swap stations are probably 10, 15, 20 years. So I understand that maybe the net loss doesn't point the best picture to judge Nio. Even the CEO has mentioned it a couple of days ago. Maybe cash flow is a better metric. Obviously it is, but still 1 billion or so net loss is not good, despite even the accounting, or if you give Nio that credit. Look into the future. Again, I told you that January, February will be weak numbers. And although I was hoping, I'm a Nio bull again, I was hoping for maybe 20, 25,000, but we quickly saw that wouldn't be the case. Even let's say, even March is a week, still, better than the last 2 years for sure. I mean, even if they come at 15,000, it's much better than 10,000 in 23 or 12,000 in 24. It's significant, but again, it's not those kind of numbers we have to see in order to make sure that Nio has this 400,000, 450,000 sales this year. Now, there's one part of me that thinks that in April with the newer models, probably we're gonna start to see, a stronger face for Nio. I wouldn't be surprised if they come in at 25,000 in April, maybe by early June, have a run rate around 30,000 cars in June. But then we are already essentially going into the second half of the year with around, I don't know, like 120,000 deliveries in the first two quarters of the year, which is not it wouldn't be the best start to the year, because then in the second half they would need to, sell like 300 to somewhere around 300,000 cars in the second half of this year in order to meet the goal of 400 or so 450,000 cars for 2025. Is it possible in 6 months to sell 300,000 cars? That's like on average 50,000 cars. I don't know. I would give them like 10-15% chance of doing it, because remember, probably 10%, because they might do 50,000 for 1 or 2 months by end of this year. It's possible if Envoy, somehow hits the strides and Firefly doing its business and the traditional Nio business does great. Sure, they would do that. And at some point, maybe the management starts to understand that they need to stop the investing in all different kind of stuff. So maybe the net loss goes to 500 million. But even if the net loss goes to 500 million, they will already be down to around 3.5 to 4 billion in cash by end of this year, due to the fact that they already gonna lose a couple of billion probably until the end of this year in the Q1, Q2 and Q3. So I think it's difficult, and I have to be honest with you, this management team has promised so much over all of these years, and they seem to utterly incompetent. Like, again, look at the Envo promises from like September and October and November of last year, and they didn't fulfill those promises, right? But that's one thing. But look at what they said about, the increasing the sales team from 2023, right? They said that, I think it was in August of 2023, they're planning to beef up the sales team to steadily sell 30,000 cars a month. That was 2 years ago almost, a year and a half, 2 years ago almost. And they didn't manage to do that. So there's been so many stuff that they promised, and we see again that the competitor like Xpeng and Zeekr, they are much, much closer to profitability than Nio is. So why would I, as an investor, maybe put my money on Nio after this past 5 years and everything has happened? Is it possible? I'm not saying they're gonna get bankrupted, but I'm very confident that they are closer to bankruptcy that even I would have believed a couple of years ago, which means that they haven't strengthened their position compared to the competition in terms of like no one is doubting that Xpeng will become profitable or even like Zeekr, right? Everyone thinks that these companies are sound and the management seems to have control. But when it comes to Nio, it's very difficult to say that. I hope that they don't get bankrupted, and I truly, truly hope that Nio is a company for the future. I like the cars. I think the design is the nicest design out of anyone there, in my opinion. But it's just, how long can you, have your money parked in a company, in a stock, and they just underperform year in, year out, and the management keeps promises, and they do like Nio Phone and lose money on Nio Phone. They do all this kind of stuff that is just not necessarily. So I think I want to be honest with you. I know it sounds negative. That's that's not my target, to be negative and just look at the bad things. But honestly, the reality is bad. It's dark. It's a black hole. It's just negative after negative. And every single time the remaining bulls that are fewer and fewer say, but you should look at it this way. The swap infrastructure will in the future turn to be a cash printing machine, and their car quality is better, or this and that. But honestly, how long can we continue to say that? At the end of the day, why isn't everyone says the market is against Nio, like some big investors are against Nio. Sure, they might be, but ask yourself the question, why aren't they targeting Zeekr or Xpeng, right? At least Xpeng. Why aren't they doing that in the same extent? Is there a reason for it? Well, the reason is that their net loss was like 4 times less than Nio, maybe. So maybe the management has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe the dilution of another 6% dilution. They doubled the number of shares outstanding in like since June of 2020. So yeah, I think we have to be honest with ourselves. At the end of the day, we are here to make money, right? We are not here to park our money and hope for the best. I want like facts. I want my money to actually increase, my investment to go up. And Nio seems currently to not be the best place to hold your money. Anyways, please like and comment in the comment section. What are your thoughts about Nio, the management? Is it time for a new CEO? In my opinion, he hasn't done anything to defend his position. I know they're not going to change the CEO, but I'm just saying that in my opinion, he has done everything that he possibly could do in the wrong way. So in my opinion, he doesn't deserve to be the CEO of this company. That's my opinion. But anyways, thanks for your time and see you in the next one.